Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And it's great to have you here. Tonight, we are talking about something that sounds quite simple on the surface, but it turned out to be the most demanding and probably the most important thing as a school leader we need to do, leading with kindness. Our guest this evening has spent 30 years, more than 30 years, leading schools across the UK, France, and the UAE. And she's currently the principal of World International School in Abu Dhabi. And her book has just come out. I've got the book here. I read it a couple of weeks ago, and it's one of the best books I've read about leadership in the last year. And we put the book review onto our platform, and it had loads of comments of people saying, "Oh, I love this book." And I read it a couple of weeks ago, and so there's a lot of empathy with this book. And it's basically Leading School Honesty and Impact, and it's published by Crown House Publishing, and it's generating a real conversation between our community and school leaders. So I'm delighted to welcome Joanna. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan.
So can you tell us a bit about your journey into kind leadership and how it all started?
Yeah, I'll be very honest with you. Probably one of the reasons why I think it struck a little bit of a nerve with people is that I came into kind leadership. I'm not a naturally kind person, but I saw something on LinkedIn the other week and somebody had written, I learned so much from people that I wanted to be nothing like. And I think in my career, I experienced a lot of unkindness, and I was watching things happen, not even necessarily to me, watching other people and seeing it destroy their confidence, destroy their self-esteem. I saw people in the teaching profession leave. People left the profession. One person I know has actually retrained to become a barber, and it breaks my heart because he's a phenomenal, phenomenal teacher. One of the best teachers I've ever seen. And we've got a real problem with recruitment, with retention, and it's not all about money. Money is obviously important, but people think, well, we give teachers more money, they'd be happy. It's not the money. It's things like workload are really important as well. But the OECD did a study and presented it at the COBIS conference. And what they said was the number one issue that is making people leave education is bad leadership. And I think it fascinates me that we tell people what to do with students. So we tell them, don't publicly shame, make sure you're kind, make sure you treat them with respect. And then I watch what happens in schools, and it's not everywhere, but I hear a lot of stories, particularly since the book's been published. People are contacting me. It's happening in schools. We've got some schools that are toxic workplaces. And my hope is that the book just makes people stop and think.
Yeah, and we hear it all the time about different stories about different types of schools and different academy trusts and different local authority schools, all having, they have the mission of being kind, but actually there's not as much kindness in the actual structures and the systems in place. And in some ways, we're all for we're hoping to have more kindness in all schools, because we have got a problem with teacher retention, but we also got a problem with school leader retention. It's dropping like anything. There's no one who wants to be a school leader. HeadteacherChat did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, of all senior management wanting to be a head teacher, it's dropped to about 20% or something now. So it is a crisis that we're having a problem with at the moment. So I mean, the kind leadership part, actually, so the journey you come here, because I mean, it's quite interesting. We had a chat a couple of weeks ago, and you started in UK schools, you went to France, you're in the UAE, and you're head of a school there, and you've got a number of schools there. That's a fascinating journey and a fascinating experience to learning so much about school leadership.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that I would say is I'm also a lead improvement partner for the Council of British International Schools. So I went to Japan the other month, and that was my 23rd visit around the world to schools. And I am telling you, it doesn't matter where you go in the world. Schools are the same everywhere. Children are children. It always makes me laugh because obviously they wheel out the student council and you ask them questions. The kids always moan either about toilet paper or canteens. But schools are schools. I think it's important that people realise that. I know people have got different things that govern them. Like obviously in the UK you have Ofsted. Here in the UAE we have ADEC. Every single school it's still just a microcosm of society, and it's little humans.
Yeah. It is. I mean, we've done some work abroad as well, and it's interesting. It's the same thing you're dealing with. You're still in the community. It's the same types of things. You're talking to the parents. You're talking to the children. You're working with outside agencies, and it's always the same bits. It's always the same accountabilities and things like that. So delving into kind leadership and what it actually means. When I first picked up the title, I'm thinking, okay, is this an invitation for people to go easy on people, to have lower standards, to avoid those difficult conversations, almost keep the peace in the school? How do you push back on that, on kind leadership?
I started the book with a quote from Al Capone, which was, "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness." And I think there's a huge misconception about kindness. They mistake kind for nice. It's not kind to have low standards. It's not kind on anybody. It's not kind on people's colleagues. It's not kind on the students. It's not fair on the parents. And I think people think being kind is keeping the peace. No, that's being nice. That's not being kind. Being kind is being honest. And what I did is I went away and I was thinking, how can I get through to people that the misconceptions that people have about kind leadership are wrong? And I did a presentation at a conference, and before the conference, people could ask questions. And it fascinated me, the questions that people asked. They hadn't even heard me speak, but they'd asked to come and listen to me. They hadn't even heard what I had to say. And they were saying things like, how can you hold people to account and still be kind? If you don't hold people to account, that's unkind. And so for me, it just fascinated me. The one that really got me was, is it just a woman thing? Absolutely not. Again, some of the kindest people I've worked with have been men, and some of the unkindest have been women. So it's definitely not that. When you're being nice, it's to keep the peace, usually to make yourself feel better, or thinking that you're making somebody else feel better. But in the long run, that's not sustainable, because it's going to collapse, and it's certainly not good leadership. If you're being kind, you have to put boundaries in place. You have to give people high expectations, but the difference is it's supporting them to meet them. So in the old days, I always say to people when I trained to teach, we were sent on assertiveness training. And I always giggle about it, because I said to my husband, why do I need to go on assertiveness training? And he said, you do, because you're aggressive. You need to tone it down. Other people need to learn how to be assertive. But I would dispute that, because for me, you set the high expectations. If you're being assertive, then you'll micromanage and you'll go in and you'll be quite harsh with people. You can help people and support people to reach your high expectations and hold them accountable. But remember that they're a human being and we're not perfect and everybody makes mistakes, and support people to get to where you want them to be. That's being kind.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's so many things I'm picking that part. Is actually, I took it also as being very disciplined and courageous as well. And actually, to be kind, actually, you have to be quite disciplined in all your conversations. You've got to be aware of what's going on and how you can get to the end point better from that kindness. And actually, that's hard sometimes, isn't it?
Yes. And I would say as well, I'll go back to boundaries. You have to put boundaries in for yourself as well. And I saw something the other week online, and it said, being kind will make you have burnout. No, it won't. If you put boundaries in place, if you're being nice all the time, you will burn out, because you're not going to be able to keep up with what you've promised people and what you've said you would do, and you're not going to come through with it, and people lose trust in you. And I think if you're kind, you need to put boundaries in for yourself as well. Otherwise, you're going to get frustrated. Quite often, kindness isn't reciprocated. If you think about how many times you get frustrated when you're at a junction, you let somebody out, they don't say thank you, and you go, oh, I stopped and let them. If you live your life being resentful about not getting a thank you, you're not going to have a very nice time of it. But you just have to accept that I'm not doing it for that person to turn around and say thank you. It doesn't need to be reciprocated. I'm doing it for the good of the school.
Yeah, I agree. And so just following up on that kindness bit, it's on the small moments, isn't it? The small moments you see in school is actually showing the kindness and showing how to be kind rather than the big moments.
Absolutely. And noticing people as well, I would say. Sometimes I'm standing on the morning and it's somebody walks through the gate and I just look and I go, are you all right? Because you can see in their face that they're not. And just that tiny moment of saying, are you okay? That means the world to them. It doesn't cost you anything. I think also people misunderstand sometimes what kindness is. And I've put in the book, I always call it the same thing, a Kit Kat in somebody's pigeonhole. That's not being kind and that's not helping their well-being. It's an elastoplast that you're putting on to go, oh, what can I do to show that I'm a kind person? That's not being kind. And I laugh about it because I say that when I was working in France, I was trying to lose weight. And a colleague of mine, he used to say to me every Monday morning, I would go, I'm going to start the diet on Monday. And on the Monday morning, it would have been somebody's birthday at the weekend and they would have brought cake in. So I would start eating the cake and my colleague would go, it's Monday, Joanna. And I'll be like, yeah, next Monday. So things that we think are kind aren't the things that necessarily are. And I'm going to put another thing in there as well, noticing yourself, being self-aware and knowing when you can feel yourself, you're not going to make a very good decision because you're angry or you're tired or something's going on in your life. Just pause. We make decisions so quickly in schools and it's not necessary. It's very fast-paced, and particularly in a head teacher role, you can have like maybe 20 people in 30 minutes come in and going, can I just have a decision about this? Can I just ask you about this? Sometimes you need to stop and pause because maybe you've had a bad day. So it's noticing everybody, including yourself.
Point. I think of some of the cordial conversations. And you think, I'm just dealing with this over here. And yeah, all the juggling moments or things like that. The next point in some ways, I want to know more about the Chase framework and what it means. And it's the two important ones I feel with that, the communication and honesty. And you argue that the honesty is an act of respect. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the Chase framework? I need to put it on the slide, really.
You could probably see in the background, it's on my wall. For me, I'm still a teacher. I've never changed. I haven't been in a classroom for a while. I still go in every day because I walk around the school, but I haven't been a classroom teacher for a while, but I still think like a teacher. And I think people need an easy way to remember what you're trying to say. And so I was searching for something that would help people remember how to lead with kindness in an easy way. So typical teacher, I came up with Chase because I was actually thinking Simon Sinek inspired it because he said that you can chase happiness. And I thought, if you can chase happiness, you can chase kindness. So I thought, hold on a minute, this ties in with everything. So communication, honesty, accountability, self-esteem, and ego awareness or ego management, however you want to call it. And for me, the communication and the honesty go hand in hand. It's about telling people the truth. And it came from a very close friend of mine who I've put in the book, who really almost slapped me in the face one day verbally when this lady kept coming up to us every Friday afternoon. We would go out for a coffee and our kids would go off and play together. We would sit and have a cup of coffee and a lady would come up and say, oh, hi, Joanna, do you want to go out for a cup of coffee tomorrow? And I would go, oh, I am so sorry. I can't do tomorrow. I've got a dentist appointment. And she'd go, oh, okay, another time. And then a couple of weeks later, the same lady would come past and go, do you fancy going out for lunch on Sunday? And I go, oh, can't do Sunday. The kids have got a swimming lesson. And eventually, after a few times of this happening, my friend turned around to me and she just said, why'd you do that? You're lying. And I said, no, I'm not lying. I'm making her feel better, giving an excuse. I'm not hurting her feelings. And my friend turned and she said, no, you're lying. And I'm watching you lie. I know you don't have a doctor's appointment. I know that you haven't got to go out for swimming lessons. And now what's going to happen is I'm watching you. And as your friend, if I ask you to go out for dinner and you say, oh, I can't do that this week, I'm going to think that you're lying because I've watched you lie to somebody else and you've lost credibility. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my goodness, I do this all the time. I was the queen of little white lies because I was being nice and not being kind, making excuses instead of saying no, full stop. That's absolutely fine to say no. You don't have to give a reason. And I think that is being kind, and you will lose credibility with your team if you're constantly making excuses and little white lies. And another thing that people do quite often is blame their boss. And that drives me insane because if you've made a decision stick to it. You don't have to say, if somebody comes in and challenges you, you don't have to say, oh, it wasn't me, it was the CEO. Oh, it wasn't me, it was the government, or it wasn't me, it was the governors, or just own it and say, I made that decision. This is what we're doing. Full stop. I think that's really important because people need to believe in you and have trust. It's your credibility and your integrity.
Very good point. Now, following up on that, what does kind leadership look like in practice when delivering some news that people don't really want to hear?
You can do it, but with humanity, but you have to tell the truth. And I think honesty doesn't have to be harsh. You can do it in a kind way. And I think it's interesting. It can come from a place of love, I call it. So we had something in school where it's very different in the UAE in terms of what happens with exclusions. And I was in my office on a meeting with the government and I could hear shouting outside, and it was a really, really angry parent. And we had made a decision as a school that his son had been in so much trouble that we were going to say to him, look, it's time to look for another school. This isn't working. Because I realised we're very fortunate and could do that here. So he had had that conversation with a colleague, but the colleague hadn't delivered the truth with necessarily kindness and from the heart. So this dad was told, your son can't come here anymore, look for another school. We don't want him. So the dad was absolutely on the ceiling, and that was factually not incorrect. But
Yeah.
I was called and sat down with dad, who was, like I say, on the ceiling, and I sat him down and I said, listen, can I just speak to you as a mum? I really care about your son, and I'm worried because this is not the right school for him. And if this carries on, it's going to become official. He's going to be excluded from school, and you don't want that on his record. I am telling you, if this was my son, I would listen to the advice. I'm talking to you as a mum. Look for another school for him that he's more suited to. And by the time the dad left, he was like, oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your help. It was exactly the same message, but it was delivered with kindness.
Yeah. And that's sometimes how it is, isn't it? In some ways, it's the interpretation, it's how the communication goes and how you communicate it with people that with the bad news. If you frame it in a compassionate way, it's much more easier for the person receiving it to understand it. But and the next part is that probably one of the biggest ones you get for is about accountability. It goes back to delivering news for people that they don't want to hear. It's accountability. How does it work with kindness? Can you hold people to, then can you get the best out of people through kindness?
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, you were saying communication. Yeah. And I think for me, holding people accountable is kind, because I've got a real thing about being fair. And it's not fair if you don't have accountability in your school, and it's not kind to the other people, but it's also not kind to the person that you're not holding to account because they're not learning. And I put in the book just a tiny example is people coming to work late or turning up to their lessons late. The break time finishes, everybody's waiting at their class. There's a class full of children there who isn't being supervised. That's a big problem. You need to hold that person to account. And I think what happens is, I always say, everybody's watching all the time. And if somebody doesn't turn up to their duty one time, hold them to account, because first of all, they need to learn. So it's kind to hold them accountable because they need to learn, but it's also kind to their colleagues who have turned up to duty. So for me, that's kindness. If you don't do that, the people who are on duty, who are watching this colleague not turn up and nothing happens and they're not held to account, are going to go, well, what am I bothering for? So to me, it's kind to everybody to hold them accountable, but also holding yourself accountable too. As I was saying, you need to be held accountable. And there are so many people when you're a head teacher that do that for you. But I think it's kind. And there was a study done, it's just slipped my mind. There was a study done, I'll remember it, Zenga Folkman did a study about high accountability and high kindness, and it was nothing to do with schools, it was industry. And they did reviews, looked at what people thought of leadership, and they looked at productivity and job satisfaction. So how happy people were in the workplace and how productive they were. And if there was low accountability and low kindness, the productivity and the happiness of the workplace was rock bottom. And what they found was leaders who led with high accountability and high kindness got the most out of their staff. Their staff were loyal, they were happy coming to work, their productivity was fantastic because they knew that they'd be held to account, but they knew it was fair and that the leaders were being kind. So it's not just me saying it. There are lots of people out there who've done studies into it who are way more intelligent than me. They have found that high accountability and high kindness does make a difference in the workplace.
And also what I get from that is it's the follow through and the consistency of it, because actually when you're talking about earlier on about the white lies, actually this goes into it as well. And it's got to be consistent all the time, isn't it? So, and it's got to be followed through all the time. So that's in some ways the challenging bit as well, because actually that's hard to be all the time keeping on, and like the lateness coming back into class, you've got to be on it every time it happens and focus on that. Is there any kind of version of accountability that seems kind but actually isn't?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think for me, I've had some massive fails where I've made lots of mistakes, and I think the one that I put in the book is probably the one that I would give. And this is, again, we were talking previously about sometimes we do things with adults that we would never do with children. And I got frustrated. So this was all on me. I'm holding myself accountable for this. I got frustrated because people have been turning up to school late. So we have a period of time where you have to be in school before the children get here. And people were coming late. And on one particular day, we'd said, oh, we don't need to have a staff meeting tonight. We can let everybody go home early. Everybody's tired. And on this particular day, I saw people coming in late and I made a massive mistake. I've called it an epic fail in the book. And I just went, right, I've had enough of this. Everybody stay until 4 o'clock tonight. I was going to let everybody go home, but now I'm not. And it actually caused a huge upset in the staff, as you can imagine, because the people who come to school on time every day were going, hold on a minute, this isn't fair. And they were right. So sometimes you can think, I was holding everybody to account and saying I was going to be kind, but now you've ruined it because my kindness hasn't been reciprocated, which is a big mistake.
I think many people can understand that and understand a lot of time on self-esteem and ego as leadership qualities. Most of us think self-esteem is a staff well-being issue, not a leadership behavior. What is the connection you're trying to draw between that?
I think self-esteem for me is incredibly important, and schools and classrooms are people's babies. And I think it goes back to everything's connected. Everything is connected. The communication, the honesty, the accountability, self-esteem, ego is all interwoven, and they all have crossovers. And I think for me, when you're communicating with people, you can really damage people's self-esteem as a leader by going in and commenting on the person and not the behavior or the action. And I've seen it so many times that people make a personal comment that's really hurtful to somebody. And what they're not thinking about is this is somebody's livelihood. This is somebody's job. They're trying their best. And you go in and you absolutely rip them apart. That damages people's self-esteem. And I'll go back to what I said before about we would never do that to a child. Or if you did, you'd be in huge trouble in a school. You would be called in, you would be reprimanded, probably taken down capability if you spoke to children in the way that some leaders speak to staff. And it's not about the person. And we need to take that out and separate the personal from the professional and make sure that when we're commenting, particularly in things like lesson observations, inspections, it needs to be about the action and not the person, because it damages people's self-esteem. And I think if you're not feeling confident and happy in your own skin, you're not going to be able to teach well.
Oh, no, definitely not. And whether coming to this as well, or is a big part in school leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, there's nothing inherently wrong with ego if you manage it well. If you have a healthy ego, again, you have confidence, you can make difficult decisions, and you are comfortable in your own skin, a bit like self-esteem. However, this is where people make a mistake with leadership. And I think what happens is, I'll give you an example. We had all of our little reception kids in this morning, and they were doing a special assembly. And the amount of kids that came past me and said, "Oh, Miss Joanna, I love you so much. You're so beautiful. I think you're wonderful." They're 5 years old. If I took that all the time, you would go, "Oh, I'm wonderful and I'm beautiful." They're 5 and I'm an adult and I can cope with that. But unfortunately, what I've seen in leadership is people's ego getting the better of them. I always say that if I ever did a PhD, when I retire, I'll do a PhD, and the title of it is The Ego of the Head Teacher, because I've seen so many people make a mistake in surrounding themselves with people who constantly tell them that they're wonderful and that they're making the right decision and that they are the greatest thing in the planet. And what they're not realizing is they're then walking out of their office and talking really badly about them. But they surround themselves with people who are yes people, who they will take credit for other people's work. If something goes really well, I'm talking about the assembly, for example. Imagine the assembly went really well, then the leader would go, "That was me. I did that assembly. It was absolutely wonderful." If the assembly had gone badly, well, it was the teacher, nothing to do with me. And I've seen it so often in schools, and just that my husband calls it Mugabe syndrome, because he's old enough to remember when Robert Mugabe first came into power and everybody thought he was great, that he was doing a good job. But then eventually a lot of sycophantic people started saying, "Oh, you're so wonderful. You're absolutely brilliant. Oh, yes, that's right. You're always right." And it just gets out of control, and it gets to a point where you don't listen to people, you won't delegate because you do it better than other people. It's a dangerous place to be. You need people who challenge you, and it needs to be professional dialogue. And I say to my team all the time, you can come in anytime and say to me, "Can I just tell you I wasn't really very happy with that decision?" And I'll go, "Okay, tell me why." And if they tell me and I haven't thought of something and they're right, then I'm quite prepared to say, "Thanks so much for telling me. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. We'll change it." Or if it's something that I feel very strongly about, we'll have a debate about it, but I'm quite happy to say, "No, actually, we are going to do it and see how it goes." And I'm prepared to discuss it afterwards. But I haven't got a little black book where I'll write down, "Oh, on this day, Jonathan came in and he criticised me, and then he's on my list then." You can't do that. And I think, it comes back to fairness. And I don't know if it's particularly an international school thing. You can't have your friends on your leadership team. You can't have your friends who are the people you're socializing with, who it's nice to be friendly, but there's a line where it needs to be professional.
And I resonate with all that. I just think in some ways there's my own leadership teams and things like that. There's always someone who's there who's saying, "Okay," challenging my decisions and challenging my thing. So it made it stronger in the long term. I thought through everything, all the decisions. It wasn't just, "Yes, let's do this," and go from there. But what should a school leader do if they recognize they're leading through fear, even unintentionally? Because actually there is quite a lot that the fear of what's going on, or getting a decision wrong, or upsetting the staff, or upsetting the parents. That isn't quite a lot. What do you reckon a school leader should do?
Reflect, I would say, and don't make decisions too quickly. And I think what I would say is that was the whole purpose for me in the Chase framework. And I've put in the introduction of the book, nothing I'm talking about is new. We all know this. Everybody knows you need to communicate well, you should be honest, we need to hold people account, you need to manage your ego, you need to make sure that your staff have got high self-esteem and that you have high self-esteem as well. But I think the thing is to actually reflect on yourself and sit back, and it's never too late to reconsider what you've done. Pause, reflect, go back and say, "Actually, can we just have a talk about this?" I understand that there's fear, but it's not healthy. It's really not healthy. And talk to people. Something that really upsets me in headship, and this is why I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Jonathan, and I can't praise you enough for it. It's not a competition. It's not about always being the best. We need to talk to each other, ask for advice, contact somebody on HeadteacherChat and say, "I've got this problem, will you help me?" There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I got frustrated recently. I think I was talking to you about it the other week. I got frustrated recently because I'd had a week of people phoning me and going, oh, you'll never guess what's happened. I'm not happy. I'm really worried about my job. Something's happened in my school. And I was their ear for about 45 minutes. I haven't really got 45 minutes, but I was being kind and going, oh, okay, listening to them. The next day I had somebody else who was saying that there was a financial issue in their school. The next day it was the next one, the next one, the next one. We all then went out for dinner and every single one of them had telephoned me separately and talked about what a difficult time they were having at that precise moment. We went out for dinner, sat down, and one of our people who was with us said, how are you? Oh, wonderful. Everything's great. My school's perfect. We've got so many children next year. My teachers are all wonderful. We're in a brilliant place. And I was just sitting there going, excuse me. I just wasted 45 minutes of my life on Monday night talking to you about how often. But I thought, wow, even with people who you consider to be your friends, just say, actually, I'm not great at the minute.
Self-care as a leadership responsibility. You're very passionate about actually how we look after ourselves. I personally, when I was a school leader, I gave everything to everyone else. And I truly admit that. It's 24/7 job. It was continuously doing those. And in some ways, I knew if I didn't step away from it in a couple of years' time, I would have been burnt out. So I recognize that one. I wasn't the best model of self-care sometimes. And actually, because I just wanted everything to go well and a bit of a not perfectionist, but I just wanted it to go well all the time. And I did anything I could to do that. So what would your final message for leaders about self-care in school leadership?
It's exactly what you've just said. It's the same for me. And I am a huge perfectionist as well. And I'm still terrible. I'll get to work at 6 a.m. I can quite happily leave at 6 p.m. My children will probably tell you that I was the worst mum in the world because school came first. And I learned the hard way. Just before we left France, I came as close as I would like to get to having a total nervous breakdown. It was a real scary situation that I wouldn't like to put myself in again. And I think that's made a big difference to me. And I think when you haven't experienced that, you don't really understand. I thought I could carry on going forever, and I think things happen sometimes where you think, actually, what? Before we started, we were having a conversation where I said, it's been a bit of a tough year here in the UAE, as you can imagine. So March and April was not particularly pleasant. We're very lucky the government were great. We were very well looked after, but it was a bit scary and I need a break. So probably for the first time in 30 years, I've said to my husband, I am getting on a plane. We're going home to France. And for 3 weeks, I'm actually going to switch off. Whether or not I can do that's a different matter because I'll probably get emails. I am wicked. But I think you do need, and again, it's about being self-aware. You genuinely, when you see people say these quotes about they can replace you in 5 minutes as soon as you leave a job, getting your head around that, it's about balance. It is a job. I love this job. I think it's the best job in the world. But I didn't realize it was a job until 5-6 years ago. It was my life. My life was school, and that is not healthy.
Yeah, and as I said, I resonate with that so much. That's basically how I was 5-6 years ago before we set up HeadteacherChat. It was my life. I didn't see any other path. I didn't see any other way of doing anything. It was just sort of, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then when you look back and reflect of what you're doing and how you're doing it, I should have seen all the signs. I should have noticed myself of what was happening. Yeah, and it's for school leaders, it's for teachers, it's everything about that. There's no point in carrying on if you're not 100% in your role in your own health. So what is the one thing you do or you have learned to do to protect your own well-being as a leader then?
I try not to worry so much anymore. And I try to preempt worry. And I've put a story in the book, which is about the time that I just thought this is absolutely mental, which was when it was the Thursday before we were breaking up on the Friday for the Christmas holiday. And my secretary came in and she said, Mrs. Thompson wants to see you tomorrow. And I went, why? And she said, I don't know. And I went home and I did not sleep a wink for worrying about what she was coming in to see me. And I was thinking, she's going to ruin my holiday. She's going to do this. And if she says this, I'll do that. And if she says that, I'll do the other. And I'd stress. I didn't sleep at all night. The next morning, secretary comes in and she said, she's here. And I remember having a physical reaction and going, come on. And I walked out and she was standing outside with a massive bouquet of flowers and a huge box of chocolates and went, thank you for everything you've done for my son. And whenever I think of that story, I think I did not sleep for worrying for a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers. That is the definition of insanity. So from then on, I learned, if something like that happens, if somebody says to me, somebody wants to see you tomorrow, and I say, why? And they say, I don't know, I pick up the phone. And I say, can I just, hello, it's Joanna. I know you've got an appointment to see me. I'd like to save you the trouble of coming in. Can we discuss it over the phone? And then I go home that night and I don't need to worry about what's going to happen the next day. I've got enough to worry about with things popping up that you don't know are going to happen in school. Schools are dynamic places. It happens all the time. But I don't need to worry about things that I have no control over. And if I do have a little bit of control, if I am feeling myself like, oh, I'm getting a bit worried about this, then I'll go and talk to the person, or I'll pick up the phone and speak to the parents, and just stop worrying about it. There's always a solution.
I just think those things like that. I just say, okay, I would go through every scenario in my head of what it was and how it was. And actually, that's useful, like for any new head teacher or any serving head teacher, to actually just nip it in bud, because it is 24/7 sometimes. It's continuously, you're on call, thinking about things and working things out and working what's the next strategy and where things are going and what went well and everything. It's continuous. Joanna, it's been absolutely a pleasure today. I mean, there's so much, actually, there's so much that school leaders can take away from this conversation, just this conversation. And there's so much more in the book that would add on to this one. I mean, I highly recommend anyone reading this book, because from today's conversation, we talked about accountability, we talked about fairness, we talked about honesty and kindness. I mean, kindness all the way through. But even those tips towards the end, if a parent comes in the night before, wants a meeting, have a phone call with them to find out what it is, so you're not stuck through and like to analyze it. I can see all the head teachers in them. Yeah, that's great. We do this all the time, and we don't know why we do all this to ourselves. And actually, we need to make it a better profession. So there's so much, and actually, kindness is so important in school. It's not the opposite of high standard. It might be helping you to get to the high standards that you want to do. So, kind leadership is about leading schools with empathy, honesty, and impact. Where can you get hold of this book? You can get it from
Amazon, Waterstones, Crown House Direct. It's in most shops in the world. Probably online, I would say. I'll live for the day when I see it in shops. All I would like to do is just share the kindness. I just want people to think.
I mean, it should be. I mean, we went to a conference, and this is one of the books that was out on display at the conference. I definitely think it would be. I've done a review of the book in the community, gives a little bit deeper what each of the chapters goes on about. And yes, thank you so much for today. It's been wonderful to talk to you again. We had a lovely conversation a couple of months ago about everything about education and accountability and all those sort of things. So maybe for another time. But yeah, is there any other key advice you would give to a school leader just starting in the role now?
Just be kind. Be kind to your whole school community, and remember to be kind to yourself.
I think that sums it all up. Thank you, Joanna. Enjoy your holiday once it finally comes.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's been really lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.